We've gone over a lot of detail of Jesus going his last week. The Lamb comes into Jerusalem on Lamb Selection Day. He's greeted by a throng of people who are chanting Hosanna, Hosanna, and throwing out palm branches and clothes in front of him. And he's riding on a donkey. And as I mentioned last week, that's what caused Jesus to cry. He really looked at the mob of people, and all they wanted from Jesus was to knock Rome out. And that's what they were chanting. That's the reason they were chanting. It's a war chant. And Jesus was impacted heavily by that. I think a lot of his prayers were about having the strength to carry on when you're the only one. And right now, Jesus going to the cross is about as lonely as you can get. His disciples have forsaken him. John does come to the crucifixion. We don't know exactly what his status was. But he's staying somewhat remote from Jesus. And if you look at how all the apostles died, you have to know that they were extremely courageous people. At this point in time, and for the next 300 years, it will be a criminal offense, a death penalty for anybody who is a Christian. And so that's the climate they were living in. And if in Justin's Book of Martyrs, and I don't know how accurate it is, this all happened a few years ago, but all the apostles except John were killed. Several were crucified. Most of them were killed by the spear. They were just speared and killed. But every one of them, except John, met a terrible death. So that's the climate they're living in. But Jesus is singly focused. He's going to the cross. He knows what's going to happen. He's going to pray hard this week about not having to, but thy will be done. And that's where all of our prayers should be. We want certain things to happen, but if they don't happen, we need to understand it's not in the way God wanted things to happen. I cannot tell you how many people over the years that I've talked to that have lost their faith, gave up their faith, walked away from Christ because the prayer wasn't answered the way they wanted it to. And people, God's not on our time schedule. His chore list is not our chore list. And so we have to understand that God is over all the world. And isn't that comforting in these days with all the chaos we've got going on in the world? But he's performing miracles. As we go up to the cross, remember we performed 27 miracles that day. By the time he said it is finished, that 24-hour period, he had fulfilled 27 prophecies. But after he's resurrected, he's in trouble. The trouble is the disciples don't think he's alive. They think he's dead and gone. And so all that he worked with the disciples is going out the window because they think he's dead. Now, we know that Jesus has some time here. He from the time he dies on the cross till the time the ladies show up at the tomb, there's some period, maybe somewhere around 18 to 20 hours of steady time there. And during that time, where do you think Jesus is? We read all about him going to hell from the time he dies until he's resurrected. And a lot of the problem with that, a lot of the translations in the Greek word translates Hades or hell. But reading hell, we kind of have a bad intonation on that. Hell has at least two parts based on the story of the rich man Lazarus. There's where the good people go, and there's where the bad people go, and there's the gulf in between, right? So Jesus went to Hades, I have no doubt about that, and preach to them dead. And what I don't know, this is way beyond anything I can conclude, is that could the wicked people see across that gulf like the rich man could and see Jesus and hear Jesus and so forth? Or did just the people that were in the good part of Hades see and hear Jesus? Again, I don't know. I think that they did. But he was there for a while before he was resurrected. And when the women came to the cave where he's buried, of course, he's not there. And then we see how he is not recognized. And that's the interesting part to me. Jesus is with two of his disciples. He's not recognized. They don't know who he is. So that's an interesting. Was there a reason for that? As soon as he spoke to all the disciples, they recognized his voice, but they didn't recognize Jesus. And I don't know if that was God's working or what, but the disciples did not know who Jesus was after he was raised from the dead. I want to go over the miracles from the time he was raised from the dead till the time he departs from the earth. He's still doing miracles. What he's saying, and remember we talked about this early on, the last week of Jesus, there are some very, very important things that Jesus said. After he is risen from the dead, there are some very important things that Jesus said. So we want to hang on every word. There are very few, and every miracle that Jesus did, because absolutely Jesus is making a point, knowing that he's going to be going away. He's trying to solidify the disciples and solidify his framework, his groundwork of establishing his church. So all that has to be done before he leaves this earth. So as we look at the miracles, or not miracles, the prophecies that he fulfilled, let's go to John 20, verses 11 through 17. John 20, 11 through 17. And we're going to try to jump around and hit all these passages. Starting with verse 11. Okay, I'll read that. But Mary was standing outside the tomb, weeping. And so, as she wept, she stopped and looked inside the tomb. And she beheld two angels in white, sitting one at the head, one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been lying. And they had said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around, and behold, Jesus was standing there, and did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him. I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned around and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Stop clinging to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I ascend to my Father and your Father, and my God and your God." So, what is the fulfillment of this prophecy? This is basically just proving his resurrection. And we have many passages that do that. And I want to... He's got 40 days to say whatever he wants to say and do whatever he wants to do. And that's one reason I want to pay especially close attention to all these words. And Joe, did you have any copies left? I didn't keep a copy. Thank you, sir. Okay. Now the next thing that we deal with is the other women that are returning to the tomb. Now, what do we know about what Jesus is doing here? What do you think? Why is Jesus appearing to these women in such a strange way? First one, he's not recognized at first. He's standing there, and I don't know again why they don't recognize Jesus, but he's the same person. He's got the scars, etc., but they don't recognize him. So we've got more women coming to the tomb. John 28. Let's look at that, verses 9 and 10. Well, that's not the right passage for sure. Is it Matthew 28? Okay, yeah, starting with verse 9 in Matthew 28. And behold, Jesus met them and greeted them, and they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and take word to my brethren to leave for Galilee, and there they shall see me. Okay. Now, what we're doing is we're setting up the fact that Jesus is alive. He's alive in his body. He's resurrected. And meeting with these people only show, or think evidence, that he's trying to show the people who were close to him that he's still alive. The entire plan of God is being sown through Jesus as he goes to the cross, but still he's got things to do. If he had left after the cross, the disciples, I don't know how they would have done. They're obviously scared. They're afraid of Rome, number one, but they're afraid of maybe of the Jews doing the same thing to Jesus, to them that they did to Jesus. And they're certainly the cause of Jesus' death. Let's see where else he appears. Now, again, he's appearing for a specific reason. And I saw this in a discussion a couple of weeks ago about the fact that this group, and I think it was, well, it wouldn't make any difference. Anyway, they feel like Jesus was not crucified. And I think I mentioned that last week. That Judas stepped in for him, and they crucified Judas and not Jesus. But to believe that Jesus is arisen is fundamental to all the faith that you and I have. It's fundamental to any of the faith that these people would have had to carry the gospel and start the church. The key thing right here is the disciples have to believe so they can carry the message, and that's what Jesus is going to give them an assignment, carry that message to the world. Now, when Jesus was teaching, remember we talked about the fact that he stayed pretty much up in North Galilee area, be on the west side of the water of Galilee, because that's where most of the religious Jews lived. Nazareth, Capernaum, all in that area up north. 80% of Jesus' teaching and time was spent in that 5-mile square area. So now he wants it to go to the world. He's trained the disciples to go out into the world, but here they are. They're in neutral. They're not in gear because they've been let down, they think, because they never thought the world would crucify Jesus. He's God's son, but he does. And so what happens with these next days, Jesus has got 40 days to turn this around. So I think he's planning that step by step by step. The women are closest to him in terms of having stayed with Jesus. And I could get shot for this next message, but you want it to get around, right? So you tell women, and they can get that around faster than the speed of lightning. but that's part of it. Jesus wants to be known that he is alive. Now, this is an interesting part of it. He won't let them touch his body. What do you think that is? I mean, he gives a reason. What do you think that reason really is? You know, don't touch me. I haven't gone back to my Father. What's he telling us? So what's he trying to prove?
Being around, I'm not here for good. I'm going to be leaving.
Okay. Yeah. And that's the interesting part of this. He's alive. He wants to make sure that everybody knows he's alive. But what's going to happen in 40 days? Yeah, he's going to leave. He's going to leave for good, which is an interesting part of this whole story anyway. Jesus leaves and goes to heaven, but what he does let the apostles know is, I'll be with you throughout all of what you do for me. And that's something that we need to understand, that God is with us no matter what we're going through, and he does not answer every prayer because he has a bigger vision in mind. But still, God is over all. Now, I've heard some people lately really getting upset about all our politics. Does anybody get upset over politics that you know? And I said, we're Christians. We need to understand that through all this, we are on solid rock. And we have Jesus Christ as our Savior. I don't have to worry about what's going to happen to this world. Certainly I want to be interested and have some concern, but it is not an all or nothing deal. You and I need to have peace in our hearts because we have the Lord on our side. All right, let's see where he was seen again. Finally, one of the apostles gets to see him. Luke 24:34. Ashley, do you have that? Luke 24:34. I don't know why that's there. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 15:5. Okay, just another appearance. And he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. So he finally does meet the disciples. He's not through with them. He's got some things to talk to them about. This is quoted here. We don't read about it in the Gospels. But he sees a lot of people. It says here in excess of 500 people at one time. To me, that sounds like he spoke somewhere where people could gather around in a fairly large crowd. And, of course, they see Jesus. We don't know, what that occasion was. It doesn't tell us. And the Gospels don't mention it. But yet that's another time that he lets quite a few people see him. And now the apostles have seen him. And now we go back to Luke 24, and I hope for the right reason this time. The disciples are on the road. They don't recognize him here either. Okay. Luke 24:13 through 31. Okay, Rachel, go ahead.
To a village named Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things which had taken place. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself approached and began traveling with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are these words that you are exchanging with one another as you are walking?" And they stood still, looking sad. One of them, named Cleopas, answered and said to him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem and unaware of these things which have happened in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "The things about Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word, in the sight of God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, it is the third day since these things happened. But also some women among us amazed us. When they were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body, they came, saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of these who were with us went to the tomb and found it exactly as the women also had said, but him they did not see. And he said to them, "O foolish men and slow of heart to believe in all the prophets have spoken, was it not necessary for the Christ to suffer these things and to enter into his glory?" Then beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, he explained to them the things concerning himself in all the scriptures. And they approached the village where they were going, and he acted as though he were going farther. But they urged him, saying, "Stay with us, for it is getting toward evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he had reclined at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed it, and breaking it, he began giving it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight.
Again, he makes an appearance to the people that he has a mission on, and they don't recognize him. Again, that's a mystery, but they eventually do. When Jesus wants them to, they seem to be able to recognize him. Let's go to where he actually meets with the disciples, Mark 16 and 14. Have a volunteer to read that, Mark 16, 14. Now, go ahead.
Later, Jesus appeared to the 11 as they were eating. He rebuked them for their lack of faith and their stubborn refusal to believe those who had seen him after he had risen.
And we look at where this is at. Now, they will have seen Jesus 3 times, actually, before they start recognizing him. But still, they don't recognize him. In fact, in Mark, it said that when they heard that he was alive, verse 11, and had been seen by her, they refused to believe it. Now, think about the situation. Jesus has been crucified. They know he was put to death. That's all they know. Why do you think they're not recognizing Jesus? There's something here because it's in the Bible. It's telling us something. What is it telling us when it tells us that they do not recognize Jesus?
Belief that he has risen, that he has actually risen yet.
That could be, Joe. I don't know. I think there's a element here of humanity, and I'll give you an example of that. What do you start noticing when you buy a new car? Do what? Yeah. Every time a car near that car drives by, you pick it up. Your radar has that car in here. And it's amazing how all of a sudden, day one, you just drove the car off the lot, you're recognizing that car because it's zeroed in on it. What about all the other cars? We don't notice them, do we? We're kind of blind toward those cars. Have you ever been in a crowd and somebody walks right by you, they don't recognize you? Not because you changed or anything, but where's their focus? somewhere else. They saw somebody they know, or they saw where they're handing out water, drinks, whatever, but they didn't see you because you weren't in their focus. Why wouldn't Jesus be in the focus of the disciples right now? They're not. Yes, that's exactly right, Gil. They don't see Jesus. He's dead. Can't be him. You know, if we went to a funeral of somebody and the next day we saw that person walking around, we would say, well, it looks a lot like, yeah, but it's not, right? It's amazing how finite our focus can be. And here's a case of it. They're not recognizing Jesus because they don't think he's alive. Of course, it can't be Jesus. It's just somebody that looks maybe like Jesus. But obviously, it's not Jesus. He's dead. So they're acting pretty much just like we would. Somebody dead comes around today that we know was buried, we'd have a hard time saying, yeah, that is that person. Well, I think that's part of the problem that the disciples have. They're not looking for Jesus. Now, should they be looking for Jesus? Absolutely. Did Jesus ever tell him that he was going to be put to death and raised again on the third day? Yeah, he has told them that 5 times already. So part of the problem here that we're getting to see is that they were with Jesus every day for 3 years. They heard all of his teachings, and a lot of his teachings were private. In other words, just the 11, or later the 12. And they don't recognize Jesus. That is so powerful in their minds that he is dead, that he can walk right up to them and they not recognize him. Again, because of that human factor we have that can't be them. I saw him killed. He was put in the grave. So Jesus has to convince these disciples that, hey, I'm Jesus, and I need you to do some work for me. So we're going on down the ranks here, finding out more about Jesus, but also more about the disciples. Okay, let's go to John 20, verses 26 through 29. Okay. And after 8 days, again, his disciples were inside and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, the doors having been shut, and stood in their midst and said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Reach here your finger and see my hands, and reach here your hand and put it in my side, and be not unbelieving." And Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, have you believed? Blessed are they who did not see and yet believed." So they had been together a week before this, and Thomas wasn't with them. And so he missed out on getting to see Jesus. I often wonder where would Thomas have been if he never got to see Jesus after that. He's not believing, but all 11 disciples, it says, are not believing. So Jesus is doing the things that he needs to do to create belief in his own disciples. So we have Thomas here who now has come. He's felt the scars in his hands. Remember, hands goes down to probably right here. And then in his side. Probably was the side his heart was on, mainly because of what came out once he punctured the skin. But anyway, Thomas missed that. We talk about doubting Thomas. Well, Thomas was even more doubting than the other disciples. They didn't believe it. He didn't believe it. But we picked Thomas out because of a fundamental factor here. If you don't see something yourself and you hear about it and it's a very improbable thing to believe, there's a good chance we're not going to believe it. I'm sure, and we've done a lot of, I guess, memorials for the September 11th day. I'm sure many of those people who got phone calls did not believe what they were hearing. Can you imagine? The 2 largest buildings in New York are falling down. might not believe that. Well, that's the disciples' case. Here somebody has risen from the dead. You know, I'd have a hard time believing that if I had somebody that I knew died and went to the funeral and they were alive the next day or the day after that. So before we get too critical of the apostles, let's think about the situation. They saw Jesus or heard Jesus, got eyewitness reports that he was killed on the cross and he was buried. So this can't be Jesus. And they walk right by him and they don't recognize Jesus. So he's got to get them to recognize him. And let's go to John 21 and read those last verses of John's book. Okay, who wants to read? And this will be pretty much the whole chapter. Who's got a good reading voice? Mine's gone. Anybody? Andy, how about, would you read that for us?
Start at 1.
Start at 1.
After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with fish laid out on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And although they were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned against him during the supper, and said, "Lord, who is it that is going to betray him?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." So the saying spread among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who is bearing witness about these things, and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. Now there are also many other things that Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written.
He singles out Peter here Of course, Peter's always brash, the first one to get in line and so forth. It's like when he and John race to the tomb. John stops at the front of the tomb. What does Peter do? Boom, right on by, right into the tomb. But here he's got Peter, and he's going to do a one-on-one session here with Peter. Why do you think he's picked Peter out to do this one-on-one session?
They would have to go to the Gentiles and open the door to help the Gentiles accept Paul.
Okay, figured he'd be the first one. Okay. What other reason can you think? Any others?
He was going to go fishing. He probably gave up.
He went fishing, didn't he?
Yeah, he went fishing, but not fishing for what Jesus wanted him to fish for.
That's a good point. True.
Might be too, did it? Oh, I'm sorry.
Like what?
I said it might be that this was part of the things that he was speaking about the kingdom of God, you know, and it was a teaching of what was coming. You know, like, you know, Acts 1:3, it said, you know, he presented himself alive about his suffering by many convincing proofs, appearing to them for 40 days, and speaking of things concerning the kingdom of God. So it could possibly be that this was part of the teaching of what was coming. Possible.
Yeah. I thought about that. Good. Lee?
Peter was the one that denied him. So Jesus wasn't through teaching Peter yet.
Yes. What did he do before he denied him? How's he already in trouble? Yeah, when they came to take Jesus, what did Peter do? Yeah, we'll fight. And then Peter says, if everybody in the world denies you, I will not deny you. Was that true? No. In fact, Jesus knew exactly what the timing was going to be for him to deny Jesus. What was going to happen before Peter denied him 3 times? The what? Rooster would crow. All right. Interesting story. I do not present this as truth, just as a thought. In studying the Mishnah, which really, the Mishnah explains the Torah, if you can believe that. Here people are writing to explain what God says. I doubt it. But they do. The Mishnah follows the Torah pretty closely. But anyway, in this situation, they're saying that Jesus is invisible. Do you think that? What's he trying to do? He's trying to show that he has arisen. He's not going to do that being invisible. I mean, that wouldn't work at all. That'd make things even stranger for these people to understand. But here, he's dealing with Peter face to face. Peter has denied him in the strongest way. I mean, how many times did he deny him? So it wasn't an accident. 3 times. And one time cursing. I don't know the man. Did Jesus know that Peter said these things? Absolutely. So he's facing Peter as somebody who has denied him. And so he's got to get Peter past this impulsiveness just to jump at something rather than think about it. And so here's Peter facing Jesus, and Jesus asks a question that just puts Peter on his knees, basically. And what does he ask him? Do you love me? And we know, we've heard many sermons. Now, I'm not a Greek scholar, but I've heard this so many times, that Peter is using the word for brotherly love, philo. Jesus is using another word. Does anybody know what it is? Yes, agape. Jesus is asking, do you love me in here? And Peter is saying, I love you here. Christ wants an answer that says from here to his feet. And Peter is still piecing out his conviction. Lord, Lord, how can you say that, right? So he knows that I love you. Again, he uses that same word for brotherly love. And he said to him again, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, well, shepherd my sheep. Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time. Why does that grieve Peter? That's right. He's already put his foot in his mouth. He's said the wrong things, and now Jesus is calling him on it. Somebody who loves me would not have denied me. Basically what he's telling Peter. And so he's getting past all the bravado, all the macho-ness of Peter, who wants to run into everything like a bull in a china shop. He's trying to teach Peter, you need to think about some things. Yes, the church can use Peter because he's so assertive and confident and he just goes. But he needs to temper that with knowledge. And Jesus is teaching him that lesson right here. So he says to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And then we see Peter was grieved. And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Now they change. Christ changes his word. Peter changes his. But do you think Peter now understands the lesson? He must, because we know he's going to die for that lesson. And, I think about, I don't know how your parents did. My dad gave me three warnings. Actually, he gave me 2 warnings. The third warning, he was walking my way. It was too late. We tend to do that, don't we? We allow somebody not to jump when we say something. Even our kids, maybe too much. Well, Jesus has just cornered Peter, and he cannot get out of it. Do you love me? And Peter he's not willing to go where Jesus is leading him, at first anyway. Now, think about this. You're doing something you really want to do. Maybe you got tickets to go see the Titans play, and you've wanted to go see this for a long time, and they're starting at 12, and you're going to have to leave probably around 10 or 10:30. And you're on your way to the stadium because you want to be there on Sunday morning. And if Jesus appeared to you and said, do you love me? What are you going to say? That's the position Peter's in. Peter has denied him, and Jesus is confronting him in a mightily way. I mean, he's looking right at Peter and said, Peter, do you love me? Now, Peter knows he's already denied Christ 3 times. So Peter is feeling a lot of heat, I'm sure. And I know I would be. But if we could think that way, that when we're doing something we know is taking us away from spiritual time, and if Jesus said, do you love me? How would you answer that? When you're doing something that's not in line with that statement. And that's, again, the situation Peter's in. He did something that wasn't in line with his belief. So now he has denied this Jesus' point. He's trying to get to a point where Peter is seeing that love is encompassing. This is the love that you die for a friend. That's the kind of love Jesus is talking about. And so his last thing he says to Peter on this session, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. What's the duty of the apostles once Christ is raised to heaven? What is going to be their job? Spread the gospel. Feed my sheep. Remember, I told the story of Zacchaeus, the wee little man, climbing up in the tree. And the reason he did that was because he was unclean. He was a tax collector. Anytime you handled money with a person's on it, like the emperor was on the coin, that's idolatry and you've sinned, so you're unclean. Well, he's unclean. Zacchaeus unclean. Jesus takes him home with him, and he tells a prominent Jew that, he said, hey, look at that guy. Why would you invite him? Jesus says on that statement, he says, I came to seek and save the lost. You have not done that. You have led my sheep out into the wilderness. You've left them hungry. You've left them without water. You have not taken care of my sheep. Now, this is interesting in that when you study the Torah, the Old Testament law, God's holy of holy place is spelled with 3 letters, D-V-R. There are no consonants in the Hebrew language at that time. D-V-R. That was the Holy of Holies. The sheepfold out in the field, taking care of the sheep, D-V-R. But pronounced 2 different ways. This is kind of like a lot of languages. It depends on how you enunciate it as to what it means. But really, they will pronounce DVR for sheepfold as DVIR, Devir. And then the DVR for the Holy of Holies is Devar. But if you look at the spelling, they're spelled the same way. Well, if you think about that, and we would see this later on in the Gospels or the Apostles' writings, what a message that sent to the Jews. The sheepfold is the same as the Holy of Holies. Where do the sheepfold belong now? Who is our intercessor? Who do we go to? Christ. There's no longer any priesthood. There's no longer anybody on earth that you go to. You go to your Savior. And so that matches. Here it are. The temple, what happens to the temple when Jesus is crucified? The curtain rents. So what did the curtain protect? Holy of Holies. So now the Holy of Holies is open. Well, Christ is telling his apostles that you go to all the world and feed my sheep. Is this just to the Jews? No. And this would be hard for the disciples just to immediately intake. As Jesus has been teaching the Gentiles? No, not by choice. Now, he's gotten cornered twice with the Gentile. But he hadn't been teaching Gentiles. In fact, he told them, I'm going to the Jews. That's my mission. I'm going to the Jews. Yes, he tells the apostles, though, you go to all the world. You go everywhere. You take my message to everybody. Yes, Rufus.
These apostles, that I will teach you all things, bring to you remembrance all that I have taught you, and lead you to all truth. And they don't remember it.
That's right.
I can't. It's hard to believe.
They're going to get a special dose. In Acts 2, they're going to get a special dose. And they need it. Obviously, you can see here they need it. There's things can you imagine if somebody you've been following and learning more about, and they died, and in 3 days they come to you and say, well, how you doing, Dick? What do you want to talk about? Would you have any questions? I think I would have 1,000 questions. And I'm sure the disciples did as well. We'll pick up there next week and we'll talk about the prophecies that were fulfilled.